Welcome to Mind Tricks Radio, where we'll explore contemporary topics in psychology through interviewing creative and innovative thinkers in the field. I'm your host, Dr. Aaron Kaplan. Thanks for tuning in. Hey, Tyler, welcome back.
Oh, thanks for having me back, Aaron.
Great to see you again. We are here back in our seats in front of the microphones talking about today's subject, which is emotional reasoning. We've done a few of these kinds of episodes in the past where we've talked about different kinds of cognitive distortions and subjects in psychology. So today we're talking about emotional reasoning. It's great to see you. This is a subject. Emotional reasoning is an interesting one. It's a cognitive error that's very common. We see it a lot in our psychology practice with our patients. I know that you do quite often. And just to refer people back, I did do one of these fun distortion of the day episodes that I recorded a bunch of those in the past where I talked about different kinds of cognitive errors and cognitive biases. So I did one on emotional reasoning. It's quick. It's about under 10 minutes, and it's a lot of fun. If people want to refer back to that to get another look at emotional reasoning, I suggest people go back and look at that episode. I don't remember what number it is offhand. Yeah, let's talk about emotional reasoning, Tyler. Sort of, how would we sort of define this up front when you think about emotional reasoning?
It's basically like coming to conclusions and or making decisions automatically based on feelings. Emotional stuff could be increases, decreases, positive or negative. Basically mistaking feelings for facts and then making decisions based on that.
Yeah, so we have a feeling, and that feeling becomes a data point or a piece of evidence to determine whether something is true or valid, and using that as part of the decision making, right?
Mm-hmm.
One thing I think we want to make sure that we mention is that emotions are normal to have, right? So when we talk about emotional reasoning as a cognitive error, we're not talking about it in terms of like emotions are bad and wrong and we shouldn't use emotions. So what do you think is the distinction between having an emotion that is valid and important versus having an emotion that's valid and important and then mistaking that for a proof of truth that is misleading?
Well, I mean, that's what we're talking about with, emotional reasoning. And you're exactly right, is that we never want to have somebody stop having feelings or not notice their feelings or stuff their feelings or anything like that. But we want to be clear that just because we really feel something very real, very true, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's, what we're tempted to conclude is a fact or truthful.
Hmm.
Like our brains want to use the fact that we're really feeling something as evidence that what we're thinking must be true or real. The reality is emotions can come up from all kinds of things that our brain interpret in our environment or within ourselves. And those interpretations might be accurate or not, but either way, those interpretations lead to feelings. And if our brain is in the habit of using feelings as if it's evidence, that can really run afoul pretty quickly and cause a lot of problems with anxieties and trauma symptoms and things like that.
So before we get too deep in the weeds of emotional reasoning, why don't we talk about some examples of it so we can make this a lot more concrete for people? And I know there are a number of ones. We see a lot of emotional reasoning with anxiety, with guilt, with anger, for example. That might be a good place to start. What do you think are some examples of emotional reasoning? We can look at anxiety as an example of that.
In my practice, I hear pretty much 100% of my clients do emotional reasoning. I mean, I think most people, even not in therapy, do a ton of emotional reasoning.
Yeah.
And so in my practice, where I treat a lot of anxieties and traumas, and that's pretty much all I do, I regularly hear people say things like, I feel like I'm unsafe or I feel like I'm in danger. And when we really look at it, they have anxiety going on and they're maybe thinking they're in danger or something like that, but they're really not. And it's just that their brain is using the very real anxiety as evidence that they're unsafe or in danger. It's sort of like if a person has a thought that they might bomb their test at school this afternoon, and thinking about that brings up anxiety, the brain's going to go, wow, I'm really feeling anxious, therefore what I'm thinking must be true. And it's just
Right.
this very automatic thing that tends to happen.
Yeah, so you talked about Feeling unsafe, that's an interesting one. So I know you see a lot of patients with trauma and PTSD. And by the way, you and I are going to do an episode on PTSD and trauma soon, so that'll be a follow-up one. But people have had traumatic experiences where they literally were unsafe. You know, they were traumatized, they were in situations that were really bad. And so then they're in situations in the present and they're feeling that way. And I think what you're saying is that even though you're feeling afraid, you're feeling scared, you're feeling anxious, and you had the experience in the past where that actually was happening, the feeling itself is not a validation that those unsafe things are actually going on presently, right? That
That's
would be an
right. That's
example of
right.
that.
That's right. The feelings are very real, but the feelings are not evidence for the conclusion that the person is coming to. Sometimes it matches where the person really is unsafe, but a lot of times they're not unsafe. And so we don't want to use emotional reasoning to come to those conclusions.
Right. It's not the only tool.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
talked about like the idea of I'm having a test coming up, I'm anxious about the test, and because I'm anxious about the bombing the test means I'm gonna bomb the test because if I wasn't gonna bomb the test, why am I anxious about it?
That's right.
What are some others? Let's talk about a couple of other anxiety examples of emotional reasoning.
I feel like something really bad's going to happen today.
Hmm.
I'm just going to stay at home. I'm not going to go out. I really have a feeling that something bad is going to happen. I'm not going to go to work. I'm going to call in sick. I'm going to stay at home. As a matter of fact, I'm going to stay in my room. I'm going to stay in bed because I just have this feeling, this gut feeling, this intuition, that something bad's going to happen. And then that's their conclusion without looking for the evidence of whether or what degree it's true or not. And then they stay home and they get relief from staying home and it rewards that because now it's like, see, I feel kind of better. That's proof that that was dangerous.
Right.
And really what they were doing is just thinking about something bad going to happen, but where's the evidence of that?
So the evidence to that person is because I'm feeling anxious, that is
Right,
the evidence that
right,
something bad's going to happen and is the warning sign for me to stay home.
right. Again, feelings are really important, but they're not evidence.
Yeah, like let's just imagine somebody just had this gut feeling of anxiety and fear of an invasion that was going to happen later in the day,
Hmm.
and they stayed home. They're like, I wouldn't be feeling this way if an alien invasion wasn't happening. So therefore, this is telling me stay home. In fact, barricade myself in the basement with a taser gun or something like that.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
obviously, in this particular case, I think most of us would agree there's very unlikely that an alien invasion would happen, even if we having the feelings associated with that happening.
Right.
Let's talk about guilt. That's another one where I think people tend to use this emotional reasoning quite a bit. Do you have any good examples of that?
In my practice, I treat a lot of trauma-related guilt. And a broad example is that we can spend 4, 5, 6 sessions working in depth on one and only one guilt issue and getting really, really clear with the logic and the facts, such that clients will sometimes say, I get it. I'm not guilty. I get it. I understand the facts and the logic that I am not guilty for these negative outcomes in this trauma. And then they'll pause and they'll say, but I still feel responsible.
Right.
And we
So,
go like, how can we work for 5 or 6 sessions in depth and you're actually agreeing with the logic? And then you're still concluding that you're responsible for the negative outcomes. And it's just straight up emotional reasoning. They're thinking about the negative outcomes and how upsetting it all was and the trauma and everything and their role in it. And then that thinking stirs up all that negative emotion, the sadness, the anxiety, and the loss, all the stuff that happened. And the brain wants to use that as evidence that somehow I'm responsible, even though logically I know I'm not.
so the feeling of guilty is the evidence that I am guilty. That's the way
Right.
that goes. Even though I can tell myself all the reasons why I'm not guilty, if I'm still feeling guilty, that sort of supersedes everything. The feeling of guilt means I'm guilty regardless of what else I'm telling myself. And that's the trap that people get into.
right? And that one actually plays out in legal situations in courts a lot. We've all heard of and seen cases online or on TV or on the news or whatever where the attorneys, high-powered attorneys on both sides, one side has a lot of really, really, really great evidence in their favor, and the other side doesn't have much evidence, but that other side with not much evidence ends up winning the case because those lawyers are really good at stirring up the emotion in the
Hmm.
jurors, and the jurors come to a conclusion and then make a decision about guilty or innocent based on their feelings, related to guilt. Like, oh yeah, that person's guilty. I got a gut feeling that person's guilty, even though all the evidence is like on the, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
interesting how it plays out.
Well, I think that probably happens in real life too. A lot of the times
Yeah,
people make very important decisions about whether to do something or not do something just because of how they're feeling guilty, and feeling guilty stops them from doing something that maybe logically they can tell themselves, I should do this differently, but the feeling sort of outweighs it. So, yeah, that's a good example of that. What about anger? What are some examples where this shows up as emotional reasoning?
classic example would be like, a disagreement starts between two people, and then it's heating up, and the angrier each person gets, the more likely their brain is to use that very real anger as evidence that they are correct and the other person's wrong. But if both people are doing that, the thing just escalates and, explodes. And that can just turn into all kinds of problems. Big
Right.
angry fight. I mean, it's a classic example. Classic example. I'm so angry that our objective, fact-based, conclusion making process kind of goes out the window, and our brains use the fact that I'm really ramped up, I'm really angry, as evidence that I am right and you are wrong. And it's not even that conscious. It's just automatic that it happens. It's very real feelings are telling me that my argument is correct and the other person's argument is incorrect. And it spins out of control.
Yeah, so again, because I'm feeling this strongly about
Yeah.
another person or what happened, and I feel so angry, what I'm feeling angry about must be true. Because
Right.
otherwise, why would
Right.
I be feeling this angry
That's
about?
right. That's right.
I had to have been wronged or treated badly or unfairly to such a degree that I would feel this angry, and because I feel this angry, that's true.
Like my coworker almost missed a Zoom meeting.
Hmm.
He must be disrespectful. It's
Yep.
like using emotional reasoning to conclude that, because I'm upset that he was late or almost missed it or whatever. And then using those emotions automatically. When I say using those emotions, I'm just saying it that way so that we can talk about it. But in actuality, it's just so automatic. It's not like we actually think like, oh, I'm feeling this, therefore blank, blank, blank. It's like I'm feeling this and I conclude that, whatever my conclusion is, it's usually not going to be accurate. Or a lot of times it's not going to be accurate.
Yeah, and the more angry you're getting, the more you're probably thinking this person purposely missed the Zoom meeting because they're disrespectful or they don't care about me at
Yeah.
all, or and that again is just the evidence of that when we actually don't exactly know why he might have missed the Zoom meeting. But again, the feeling there of anger is the piece of validation that tells you that something was wrong there. So why do you think emotional reasoning weighs so strongly in people's decision-making process? Why is this such a big deal?
I don't know that I've really read about that somewhere or seen studies on it, but our team used to talk about this a lot years ago at the National Center for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. And I remember having conversations about this. And I think the general idea is it's thought that, in much of our evolutionary history, it was just a survival mechanism. It's like we didn't really have the luxury of kind of pausing and thinking things through. And it's sort of like we have this, you can think of it as a very strong false positive system. It's like a very sensitive smoke detector in a home that goes off when broccoli is steaming in the kitchen. It goes off when dust is stirred up because we're vacuuming. It's just so it's got a lot of these false positives. And it's thought that if we have a lot of false positives in our evolutionary history, we're still going to run and get to safety if we conclude something based on emotion that we're in danger, for example. We're still going to run and get to safety. And maybe 999 times out of 1,000, it was a false alarm. It wasn't really a dangerous situation, but we're still alive. And if we're in that habit with a strong false positive system, then the one time out of 1,000 that it really is a dangerous situation with some big predator chasing us or whatever, that we're still going to be likely to increase our chance of survival. And so the thought is that this mechanism developed over time, and yet because for the last 100, 200, 300 years, we're living in a really different kind of world where, many of us, at least in the Western world, are much safer than in the past, but we've still got this evolutionary mechanism built into us from long ago that, we still carry this around, a survival mechanism, basically.
Yeah, I think that's a really good explanation of it, actually. And we know from cognitive behavioral therapy that people tend to be a lot more aware of their emotions than they are of their thoughts to begin with. And a big part of CBT is slowing things down and figuring out what are the thoughts that are buried in there, the automatic thoughts that are causing the feelings to occur, because
That's right.
feelings are very visceral and they linger. Thoughts are instantaneous electrochemical events that happen in the brain that we're not aware of, most of them that are happening. So that makes a lot of sense from an evolutionary perspective.
That's right. That was well said. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's sort of like cave people didn't have the luxury of going, well, gosh, where's the evidence here? I mean, it smells like a big predator and it sounds like a big predator. And I'm going to wait till I get more evidence. I mean, somebody's waiting around to get all the evidence. They're going to be eaten, you know?
right, right, right. So what are the psychological costs involved with using emotional reasoning as a common or typical way that people navigate decision making?
Well, I mean, there was all kinds of problems that happen because there's so much inaccuracy that comes out of emotional reasoning, from building a habit that's not helpful to, I mean, we consider in our practice yet another form of negative self-talk. It's a negative thing that's going on in the brain and within oneself that causes problems. Daily feelings start to become proof that something bad is going to happen, and people can become more and more and more reliant on moving through the world based on their feelings rather than, more like facts and evidence. Again, feelings are really important, but I mean, I wouldn't want to go to a cardiologist and explain some of my symptoms and then have the cardiologist say, I got a gut feeling you're having a heart attack. Let's put you on the operating table and put a stent in. And I'd be like, what, are we going to do any blood tests or echocardiograms or stress? Oh, no,
Right.
no, no. I got a feeling. I got a feeling you're having a heart attack. It causes problems, in other words.
Yeah.
So we don't want to get in the habit of relying on emotional reasoning. It can feed anxiety, guilt, anger. The net effect ends up being that we get stuck in cycles that reinforce negative beliefs and limit growth in a variety of ways. And that's something we want to be careful about. We want to do the opposite of that. Opposite. Well,
Yeah.
how about you? What do you think the psychological costs are? I mean, what do you notice in your practice?
Well, I agree with everything that you're saying, that people tend to become more reliant on their feelings as a validation for their decision making. And because of that, people can get into cycles that they get stuck in reinforcing behavioral patterns and making decisions based on that and not based on evidence. And then you get people just getting more chronically anxious, feeling more chronically guilty or angry. And of course, we want to help people get away from that as much as possible, to be making decisions based on facts and evidence, more so than based on emotions solely as a source of evidence. But that gets us into kind of another area, though, Tyler. And you hear people asking this question a lot, it comes up a lot. So if we're saying that emotional reasoning is not the most helpful way for making decisions and for managing your feelings, then what is the helpful aspect of emotions? What are the role of them in our lives? Because we don't want to eliminate emotions. We don't want to just become robots. Like that would be no fun of an existence.
Right. Yeah, right, right, right. In my practice, we spend a lot of time talking about how we can use emotions, again, continue to be aware of them and talk about them when you want to talk about them and have the emotions. But we spend a lot of time talking about like not automatically using them as a fact to come to a conclusion. We say, let's back off of that a little bit and use it as a signal to therefore look for the evidence to support or refute whatever this conclusion is that I'm tempted to confirm. If I was using emotional reasoning, it's like I'm treating my thought as like a fact. It's true. I really am in danger or I really am unsafe. Whereas if we go, wait a second, let's treat that unsafe or I'm in danger as more of a hypothesis or a guess, and let's back off of that, and let's use the emotion as something's. I'm noticing I'm feeling something. Let me look at what I'm thinking. Let me look at what's going on in my environment. Let me look at who said what, who just did what. What am I noticing? And take my time. In most situations, we can really take a fair amount of time to observe and notice all that. And often we're going to see a really different picture. I would say in a clinical population in my practice, usually and almost always, we're going to see a different picture when it comes to like anxiety. In
Right.
a non-clinical population, often we're going to see a different picture.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that makes a lot of sense. But to be clear, emotions can be a helpful source of data information. It's just
big
one
time.
one data point. Like
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah,
that instantaneous, like my intuition,
yeah,
my immediate knee-jerk reaction before I'm like a
yeah,
precognition state is helpful for me because I'm picking up on things that I'm not consciously aware of, and it can be helpful. But I think what you're saying is after we're aware of that, pulling back and weighing it in the bigger picture of the context, the other information, it's just one of many committee members that are in your head providing data for you to make a decision about something. So,
yeah. Here's another way that I look at it and sometimes talk to my clients about it, is we can think about like say anxiety, for example, coming up as the smoke detector that's on the ceiling in the house. When the smoke detector goes off, that's like having some anxiety, for example, it doesn't necessarily mean the house is on fire. What it is like it's an awareness thing that we can learn to pay attention to and go, okay, what does this signal mean? And therefore, I'm going to look around the house. I'm going to walk around and kind of sniff or smell for smoke. I'm going to see if anything's burning in the kitchen on the stove. I'm going to look for the evidence, but I'm using that smoke detector as a signal. And most of the time, it's incorrect. Like I say, most of the time it's, the broccoli was steaming in the kitchen or the dust was stirred up or the battery was getting low or something and it started chirping or beeping.
yeah.
But yeah, I like the way that you said that actually, that you can look for what the information is.
Emotional reasoning is something we're aware now that we need to pay attention to, and it is a common source of irrational thinking and cognitive bias or whatnot. How do we counter emotional reasoning? What are some of the techniques or strategies we can use to manage this when it comes up for us in our lives?
In my practice, I do a lot of countering of emotional reasoning and teaching clients to counter it that is undoing, I know this is going to sound funny, undoing what other psychologists previously taught them to do.
Hmm.
I've had hundreds, if not thousands of clients tell me that previous psychologists they work with said, think about doing this in your life and how does that feel? Now think about doing this other thing. How does that feel? Which one feels better? Okay, that's telling you something. That's the one to go towards. And it's
Right.
like, wait a second, that's not a healthy way to go through life. So we talk about all that. And probably the main way that in my practice we learn to counter is by first learning to increase awareness of it. And the way that we do that with is kind of a semantic tool or mechanism. As I teach clients to pay attention in their thoughts and feelings, I mean, in their thoughts and speech, excuse me, in their thoughts and speech, to the words I feel when the rest of the sentence is not about a feeling, an emotion, or a physical sensation. If it's about a feeling, an emotion, or a physical sensation, it's perfectly okay. But if it's anything else, pay attention to it, catch it. And we do that for months while we get on with other things, weeks or months while we get on with other things. And then we come back to that once they're much more aware of that. Then we come back and we talk about how to change it. So there's a variety of ways, but this is one of the ways in my practice. So what we do is we end up backing off of the I feel. We take the statement or the sentence that they were saying or thinking, and we take out the I feel and we put the word think with a question mark right behind the word think in the sentence. So instead of, oh, I feel like my friend is going to be mad at me. That's just the conclusion that they come to, right? Emotionally reasoned conclusion. Instead, we'll change it to, I think, question mark, I think my friend is going to be mad at me. And then
Yeah.
let's test it out. Or let's see where the evidence is, you
So
know?
let's be real clear. Why is that important? So the if I made the statement, I feel my friend is going to be mad at me versus I think my friend is going to be mad at me, why is that difference in semantics important?
Yeah, good question. We don't want to just take out the word feel and put the word think in there because we could still be doing emotional reasoning,
Hmm.
with just with different wording on the surface level. We want to back off of a conclusion and turn it more into a hypothesis. And that's one of the reasons we put more of like a question mark after the word think. And you hear the tonal. If we change, I feel like my friend's going to be mad at me to I think my friend's going to be mad at me, that's still emotional reasoning, probably. If we change, I feel like my friend's going to be mad at me to I think my friend's going to be mad at me. I'm not sure. I think, but I don't know. Question marks. Then we're in a better position to either test it out or look for the evidence to support or refute it, or do some things to come to a more accurate conclusion. And it may very well be that my friend is mad at me, or it may not be, but we don't want to automatically conclude it based on the emotion, so we can
Right.
be more likely to be accurate about it by backing off of that. Does that make
Yeah,
sense, or is that
that makes perfect sense, Tyler. But I was also thinking about it on another level also, and tell me whether this sounds like this has any merit at all. That just using the I feel statement when it's not a feeling is reinforcing the idea that feelings are the validation that something's true. So just using the word I feel my friend is going to be mad at me, there's no actual feeling there. There's no actual feeling. The feeling might be guilty or upset, but you're not feeling that the friend is going to be mad at you. So identify the feeling if it's a real feeling and then assess whether that feeling is true, but try not to mix up feelings when feelings aren't actually the things that you're talking about in the sentence, because then we're trending toward emotional reasoning as a way of going about our thinking.
that's exactly right. And we talk about that as well. And yeah, that's important. That's exactly right. Yeah. Look
Yeah.
at what is the feeling that I'm having. I'm having a real feeling, but let's see what it is I'm thinking and what does the evidence show? Because this very real feeling I'm having is not necessarily evidence of what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So like learning to identify that is real important. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess to be real technically nitpicky here, if we were going to implant the best way to frame this, if somebody was going to think about it, they might say something like this. And I'm not expecting people do this, but just for the point of conversation, we lay it out more concretely. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling anxious because I'm wondering, could my friend possibly be mad at me? I don't know. But in not
Excellent.
knowing and imagining that they might be mad at me, that is making me feel anxious. So
Excellent.
technically
Perfect.
speaking, that's more an
Perfect.
accurate way of looking at it.
That's perfect. That's exactly right. Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
You asked me what I tend to do. Like, I'm just sort of like a classic cognitive behavioral therapist in many ways, I think. I really like the idea of like the Socratic questioning what other evidence or data could possibly be causing this. Let's look at other reasons why this might be the case other than your feeling that it is. What are some other ways to reframe the situation? What is the evidence and data obviously is very important in cognitive behavioral therapy. And some of these techniques like mindfulness and journaling, those are things we talk about a lot in terms of paying attention to thoughts and feelings and sorting through that. And behavioral experiments too, Tyler. What can we say about that as a method for countering emotional reasoning?
Well, yeah, hold that thought as a bit of a hypothesis and then move forward with what it is you're planning to do, or meeting up with your friend, or whatever the thing is, and see what the evidence shows and how it plays out, test it out basically. Seeing if it really turns out the way the person is thinking it's going to turn out, or the way that they're concluding it's going to turn out based on their emotional reasoning. And a lot of the time it just doesn't turn out that way. Which brings up another point about, when we talk about Socratic question, like what else could explain this? We can also say, well, what are some other times when it hasn't turned out the way that you were thinking in the past? You felt like you were responsible, or you felt like your friend was going to be mad at you, or you felt like something bad was going to happen. I've heard my clients say that many, many times, and yet week after week, it just doesn't turn out that way. So what does that tell us? That
Yeah.
usually when I'm having these feelings and these conclusions based on emotions, it's usually not coming out, it's not accurate.
Tyler, and sort of wrapping up, let's kind of have some overarching thoughts here that might be helpful for people in noticing and managing emotional reasoning that comes up in their life. What would be a couple of thoughts that we might have some parting thoughts that might be helpful here for paying attention to that.
One of them, like I was saying, is practice paying attention to I feel in thoughts and speech when it's not about feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like my friend is going to be late for lunch. My friend being late for lunch is not a feeling. So that can help to increase our awareness. I feel like something bad is going to happen today. I feel like I'm in danger. Being in danger is not a feeling. It's a fact. So we can use the I feel language in that way to increase our awareness. If instead we're saying I feel anxious today, or I feel scared, or I feel angry, or I feel happy, those are all feelings. I feel hungry, I feel pain in my knee, I feel tired. That's all okay. That's what feeling stuff is. So that's a really great way to start increasing awareness, of it. And then keeping in mind that these feelings are absolutely not proof of reality.
So that might be the second thing, is really becoming more in touch with your feelings, so to speak. I'm feeling this way. Because I'm feeling this way, I'm telling myself such and such is going on. The feeling might be reflecting something accurate. But before I conclude that based on the feeling, let me take a step back and ask myself, what is some evidence and data for this? Are there other possible explanations? Things like journaling, talking it through with an objective friend, or even getting, psychotherapy, which you and I would obviously advocate for. Especially cognitive behavioral therapy is helpful for this kind of thing. Not that I'm against any other kind of therapy, but this tends to be a CBT sort of concept, these cognitive biases. So that can be very helpful.
Yeah.
Well, Tyler, this was a really fun conversation. Thanks for coming
Yeah,
on with me
interesting.
today and talking about emotional reasoning. And I know we're going to meet up soon to talk about PTSD. I'm super excited and looking forward to that.
Always a pleasure, Aaron. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Mind Tricks Radio. I hope you have enjoyed the program. For more information about Mind Tricks, you can go to my website, www.waikikihealth.com. Be sure to subscribe to Mind Tricks on your preferred podcasting host to be notified of new episodes of Mind Tricks. Please take some time to give Mind Tricks a good rating and review wherever you're listening. It really helps get the word out to new listeners. And please like and share Mind Tricks posts on Twitter and Facebook by following your host, Dr. Aaron Kaplan.